Hey guys, what's up? I was just yelling about Mercury retrograde, and now I'm here to yell about Jupiter in Aries. So I hope you are well, or as well as you possibly can be, given just all of the circumstances. Hello, thank you for joining. All the circumstances that are both astrological, social, societal, just good for you for getting through. Hi, thank you so much for joining. So yesterday I was yelling a lot about Mercury retrograde. Like I said, it is going to sort of like set the tone for the next month, at least until June 2nd, but honestly shadow period as well, so to mid-June. Thank you everyone for joining. But I wanted to also, now that we've kind of like come down from like the fear of like, okay, Mercury retrograde is here, even though honestly it's nothing to fear at all. In fact, I really am like excited about this retrograde. I feel like it's gonna be a really necessary pause. But but I wanted to now talk about what also happened yesterday, which is not only Mercury going retrograde, which by the way, my hair, don't have any comments about it because I'm not sure either. Jupiter also went into Aries, which is, this is such a like physical shift that we're going to see. And I'm always, we talk a lot about like movements that happen with the inner planets, right? So like Mercury and Venus, but Jupiter being an outer planet, of course we're going to see the shift on a collective level, but we're also absolutely going to be seeing this shift on an individual level. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like what this means and what this can feel like for us and how we can best work with it, especially because it's going to be in the sign of Aries, I think until like the end of October. So we're going to have this energy for a while. And what's so beautiful about this is that this is really significant. Like, this is really fucking significant. The reason why it's so significant is because this is the first time Jupiter is going to be in Aries since 2010, which I'm going to talk about that, by the way. We're going to do some, like, mental time traveling here. But what's beautiful about it is that Aries is the very first sign of the zodiac. So Jupiter has officially made its like way through all of the signs and landed back in the beginning. So there is this element of like, and let me know if you guys are feeling this, because I'm feeling this so loudly, of like new. Like, it's funny because we're in this like reviewing period, right, with Mercury retrograde. I've had a couple friends, and myself included, feeling like they're in a form of like a loop. Like, they're seeing a lot of like situations and things that have already happened kind of happen again. So we're in that reviewing recalibration period. But what I will say is that with this Jupiter and Aries energy coming through, it really is this element of like, we're entering newness and we're creating our new chapters. And that's obviously something that comes up a lot with different transits, right? We have like Pluto was in oh my God, Pluto was in retrograde. I think it still is actually. So there was this element of like rebirth and death, right? So we're always looking at like what's new, but like Jupiter being in the sign of Aries is very much like, what are you going to initiate? What are you going to create from this space of newness that we have right in front of us, right? It's like, it's giving very much staring at the blank page before you open up the dirty window. Do you know what I mean? But oh God, what I want to say, I don't want what I yell out to be contradicting. So let me make it very, very clear, especially because like when you look up and see what people are saying about like Jupiter and Aries, a lot of it is like, jump off the ledge, do that thing, follow that impulse, right? Because Aries is known to be a sign that's very impulsive, that's very much about like doing and going and following the feeling and creating from that feeling. And that's iconic. And we're going to like take some of that energy with us, but you want to go and do with discernment. And I'll break that down more deeply, but like all I have talked about with this Mercury retrograde is moving with more slowness, with more intention, with really taking your time, not only to savor what's in front of you, but to think through what is next for yourself. But you want to be in that sweet spot of not overthinking to the point where you have overthought the action and now it's just dead, but also not. When you have an impulse, it's good to let that impulse marinate. And then if that impulse survives, the word that I wrote down, reflection. If the impulse survives reflection, then do it. But this is really a time to take inspired action. So witness, like, what am I being called to do right now? What am I being called to create? What are the things that feel good, that feel honest, that feel safe for who I've evolved into? And how can I follow and nurture and create from that space rather than a space of I have to do, I have to work with this energy, so that means I have to be as productive as possible, but it's not actually coming from an inspired space. As we create this new life for ourselves, right? And I really want to emphasize, yay, yes, not speaking your language. And I'm just honestly, this is pure excitement because I'm so like, this is such a good transit, guys. And it's important to note that like, because this is like this setting it's this reset, this recalibration, right? Because like I said, Aries is the very first sign of the zodiac. So now Jupiter has made its way through all of the signs. You've learned so much lessons, you've gained so much knowledge that now when we're in this space of initiation, we're no longer initiating from outdated paradigms of like valuing ourselves through productivity or needing to appease like opinions and validations that don't actually matter to us, right? We're now being able to create from a space of truth because now we actually know what our truth is. You've gotten to know yourself so well over the course of these past years, especially these past 2 years, especially these last like few months. You've gotten to know yourself on such an intimate level that now when you're in that creative and fertile space, you're able to give something that is true, something that's honest, and take aligned action. So if anything, aligned and inspired action is what I would really invite everyone to like center their space of productivity on right now. Like what feels good? What do I want to create? And that bleeds not only into like, you know, our fertility and what we're, you know, creating and expressing in art, but also just like what feels good in terms of like the boundaries that I want to have for myself, and what feels good in terms of like the kinds of relationships that I want to have. You know, I think how this is showing up for me, and you know what? Let's get into it. Jupiter has not been in the sign of Aries since 2010. So you want to take a second, if you can, go on Facebook, if you were a Facebook user, and look up like what were you posting in 2010. Really look at like who was I in 2010. And for like some pretty reflection, look at like, damn, what is the version of me that I'm standing in right now? What parts of me is like 2010 me so proud of that I've created for myself, that I've evolved into? Like take some time to really reflect on that. I'm going to share that as a prompt at some point. But outside of that, really look at like what have I learned about myself since the layers of me that I've shed since 2010. Or for a lot of you guys, if you were like my age, you were really like kind of becoming, you were in that adolescence moving into young adulthood stage. And so it's like, what did I learn about myself as I've, you know, moved through identities and I've shifted and I've experienced and I've, you know, bled and cried and created, and like, you know, what have all these experiences taught me about who I truly fucking am? And now that I'm in that space of newness, what do I want to create from this understood truth? I'm free lifestyle. Absolutely. Yeah. And so now you want to look at like, well, what does freedom mean for me? Like, how do I now personally define freedom now that I've gained so much knowledge in terms of like what my truth is? I hope that this is making sense. But yeah, so really reflect on 2010, the lessons, the karmic lessons that you've learned then. And the reason why I brought that up is because there's a lot that I really had to like face in terms of like what life was like in 2010 and everything that I've experienced since then. But like love and the way that I experience love and like what I needed from love has really shifted. I think I've always had this narrative of like, I'm good, I don't need much, I'm easygoing, you don't even need to call me. And now I'm in a space of like, I actually like need validation through action. Like I need you to show me that you love me in a really intentional and like forward way. Because I've learned so much about how that was like a trauma response of taking care of myself. Do you know what I mean? What I'm saying is this initiation not only has to come from a place of like productivity and creation in a space that's aligned and inspired, but also like what relationships do I want to call into my life? What ways of expressing my physical identity actually align with my truth? And because Aries is the child of the zodiac, you really want to continue to check in with your inner child. Beautiful, thank you. Check in with your inner child. And we know I'm a strong advocate for inner child healing. I'm always about like keeping your inner child alive. I am someone who just like thrives in their childlike essence. But it's more than that. It's really checking in to see like, holy shit, how can I do you honor? How can I do you a service by taking all of this freedom that you yearn for and now using it in a way that's true and honest and nurtures what you need, right? Having that like constant dialogue with your inner child, and now moving from a space of like, if my inner child would have been creative without condition then, but didn't have the resources, now that I do have the resources, how can I be creative without condition, right? And when I say condition, I mean not needing it to be done for the sake of monetary gain, but rather as a form of like creative output and expression to be expressed. So yeah, connect with the kid in you, not just in the traditional ways by honoring like what kind of life would they have wanted to live now that I have aligned myself with my truth. Because the thing about evolving and healing and evolution is that you don't exactly become a new version of yourself. You truly return to who you were underneath so much conditioning, so much pain, so much that was thrown on you. Yeah, beautiful. Creative without condition. It's a T. So now that you've kind of returned to that state of like your core, who you were before that, you can now utilize the tools, the resources, the community that you've built to really live in your truth. So yeah, Jupiter in Aries is really breathing into our lives this newness, this abundance. And you want to look to see where Aries rules in your chart to kind of see where this newness and abundance is living for you. I do want to say the cardinal signs, right? So Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. Sun and rising, you're really, really going to be feeling this. Good for you. You deserve it. You've had a few years. So really honor this and bask in this. But ultimately, we're all going to be feeling this shift. This feels very much, and I'm curious to know if you guys are already feeling this element of like, there's just newness afoot, right? And it's funny because, wait, let me share this because this is so dumb. I did this last night. And then this morning I looked at it and I was like, I hella spelled forward wrong. But like I was just doodling and I wrote look back to go forward. That's so embarrassing because forward definitely has 2 R's. But like I was like, who we are now, it's exciting because we get to nurture this newness, but also like you want to look at your roots and look at where like, did that learned belief come from? And like this is supposed to be the Earth's mantle. Whatever. The point is that you want to look backwards to go forward, right? You want to use this retrograde as a time to like look backwards, look at what you desired in childhood. What parts of you did you want nurtured that actually were stifled, right? Or conditioned to be diluted? And how can you now take the space and the resources that you have to grow that thing, right? Like look backwards, look at what you desired then, look at who your experiences were then, your belief system and how those belief systems created your reality then. And then now stepping into this forward space, how can you either redefine those limiting beliefs or really just create from a new sense of empowerment, knowing that like I actually have so much power that I gave myself credit for. And also this has been showing up for me, and I'm curious to know if this has been showing up for anyone else, but like looking backwards to go forward really also looks like ancestral work ancestral work not just on the element of like what were my distant ancestors in West Africa, what were they experiencing, but also just like my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, how can I liberate them? How can I look to see what they desired, what they didn't have access to expressing? What forms of pleasure were they stifled from? And how can I now stand in a place where I have those resources and that ability to liberate myself and them through my expression of self and through my self-liberation? Once again, hope that makes sense. So all in all, in summary, Jupiter has entered the sign of Aries for the first time since 2010, so you want to reflect on not only who you were in 2010, but everything that you have learned and shed and become and undone since 2010. And ultimately, what I think you really want to center life on right now is how can I follow impulse and an inspired action in a way that honors, necessary reflection, but ultimately not overthinking to the point where nothing is done, right? Being in that soft middle spot of like, oh, I have an idea. Okay, let me see how this idea feels in my chest. Let me see how this idea feels in my stomach. How does it feel in my mind when I see it play out? How does it feel in my fingertips? What does this idea taste like? And if all of the boxes are checked, then you go and you do, right? But if you're just like, I gotta get done to get done because I'm 30 and I haven't accomplished this thing and so let's go, then you're gonna burn yourself out, right? But like we're gonna have an influx of energy anyway, so you wanna make sure that you're utilizing and you're shaping this identity to point towards living more deeply in your truth. And when you want to connect more deeply with your truth, you want to look backwards and look at what was the child in you that had ideas and forms of expression, and also just like not just ideas and expression, but I also said this is something that really we're going to pour into our experiences with relationship, where we live, right? Like if you're like, the kid in me really wanted to be like in the city, like looking at how you can calibrate your life to fit that mold, or they wanted to be an artist, they wanted a really loving relationship, wow. I just had such an insight on like myself in that moment, because little me really did want like a fairy tale ass love, and then life was like not realistic, and I'm like, no, yes it is. Anyway, enough about me. What I also wrote, and I really want to close this out with, is fortune favors the brave. I'll get back to that. Also, I want to say pay attention right now, because we're in such a karmic period that like signs and synchronicities. The universe is really going to be communicating with you right now. Mercury retrogrades are so, and like it's Mercury retrograde, it's eclipse season, so you really want to pay attention to the things that find themselves repeating in your life. So like in the past 2 days, I've heard so many people say it's not black and white, there's always a gray area. And I'm not sure how this is going to apply to my life, but I know that it will because it's showing up too many times. So I wrote it down. So like, for instance, if there are things that are coming up, if there are colors, if there are numbers, if there are quotes, if there are lyrics that are like really particularly standing out right now, pay attention to them and write them down. But fortune favors the brave is another one. And it's coming up so clearly right now because Jupiter is a planet that really is going to gift you. It's going to gift you when you give yourself the permission to be brave, and being brave in terms of like saying what you want to say to that person, executing that creative project, expressing yourself physically in a way that you didn't give yourself permission to, moving to that new place that's scary, but ultimately you really want. Whatever bravery looks like for you right now, if it's in the micro ways in terms of like, I wrote something and maybe I want to share it on Instagram, or like, I created this thing and I just wanted to be seen. Maybe I'm worth that. Those little ways that you pour into your bravery, you're going to be rewarded for it. So fortune favors the brave. Be brave, but do not take action if it's not from a space of inspiration and alignment. So check in with your body. And I think that's it. Does that make sense? Do you guys feel this energy? Me just yelling at myself. No one's even okay. Yeah, and what I read on Twitter, I didn't write the tweeter, but they really killed it. The impulse is valuable, but it must stand the test of reflection. So have the seed, witness what you're feeling, reflect on it as a form of nurture, and then move from that space. Okay, good. Thank you. Yes. Thanks. With that being said, I'm so excited about Jupiter and Aries. As you can see, I read that like this is the transit for people who speak with way too many exclamation points. And I'm just like a walking exclamation point. So I'm super excited about this, and you should be too, especially if you have any major cardinal placements. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side, homies. It'd be obnoxious if progress wasn't so much needed. Listen, babe. Fortune favors the brave. That's all I'm going to say. Love you guys. Enjoy this transit. We have it for a good ass minute. We have it all the way until October. It'll go retrograde back into Pisces for a little second, but then it'll move back into Aries, so it's super exciting. Not gems. Okay, beautiful. See you guys next time.